Some stories begin with a single act of arrogance. Others begin with a bond so deep it can't be broken by fear, pain, or even violence. This one began with both a careless foot, a loyal dog, and a man whose past was hidden behind calm eyes and a quiet strength. It was a humid evening in the city, the kind where the air feels heavy and tempers run short. The downtown square was alive with the sounds of traffic, laughter, and the distant wail of sirens. People hurried along the sidewalks, eager to get home or meet friends for dinner. But in the middle of the chaos, a police dog named Thor sat patiently at his handler's side, his golden fur gleaming under the streetlights. Thor was no ordinary canine. He was a legend in the department, famous for his discipline, his courage, and his uncanny ability to sense danger before anyone else. His handler, Officer Jack Mason, was equally respected, though few knew the full story of the man behind the badge. Jack was quiet, unassuming, and rarely spoke of his past. But those who looked closely could see the scars on his hands, the way he moved with silent confidence, and the bond he shared with Thorabon, forged in fire and tested on battlefields far from home. That night, Jack and Thor were on routine patrol, weaving through the crowds in the square. Jack's eyes scanned the faces around him, always alert, always searching for trouble. Thor walked at his side, his nose twitching, his ears flicking at every sound. As they passed a rowdy group of young men outside a bar, Jack felt Thor tense. The men were loud, their laughter edged with something mean. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man in the leather jacket, stepped forward, blocking their path. "Hey, look at this mutt!" the man sneered, his friend snickering behind him. "What's he gonna do? Bite me?" Jack kept his voice calm. "He's working. Please, step aside." But the man wasn't interested in respect. He grinned, looking for approval from his friends, and then, with a careless arrogance, he lifted his boot and pressed it down on Thor's paw. The world seemed to stop. Thor let out a low, warning growl, his body rigid with pain and anger. Jack's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move. "Not yet." The man laughed, pressing harder. "What's the matter, dog? You scared?" Jack's voice was cold, quiet, and deadly serious. "Take your foot off my partner!" "No." The man's friends jeered, egging him on. "What's he gonna do? Call for backup." "You gonna cry, officer?" But Jack didn't flinch. He met the man's gaze, his eyes steady and unblinking. Thor stayed perfectly still, his training holding him back, but his eyes never left Jack's face. A small crowd began to gather, sensing the tension. Some pulled out their phones, ready to record whatever happened next. Others whispered, recognizing Jack and Thor from news stories about daring rescues and high-profile arrests. But no one, not the crowd, not the arrogant man, not even Thor, knew the truth about Jack Mason. No one knew that before he wore a badge. He had worn a different uniform. That before he was a cop, he was a soldier, a member of an elite special forces unit, trained to face the worst the world could offer. And as the man pressed his foot harder into Thor's paw, Jack's calm never wavered. But inside, a storm was building. The crowd held its breath, waiting for someone to make the next move. And in that moment, everything changed. The square seemed to shrink around Jack, Thor, and the group of men. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a few people calling out for the man to stop, but most just watched, transfixed by the unfolding drama. Jack's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm, almost eerily so. "I'm only going to ask one more time," Jack said, his eyes locked on the man's. "Take your foot off my partner." The man smirked, clearly enjoying the attention. "Or what? You gonna sick your mud on me?" Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. Thor's growl deepened, but he didn't move, his training holding him in place despite the pain. Jack's hand hovered near his belt, not on his weapon, but close enough to remind everyone that he was still in control. A few feet away, a young woman in the crowd whispered to her friend, "That's Officer Mason. He's the one who saved those kids last year, and that's Thor. He's famous." But the man with his foot on Thor didn't care about stories or reputations. He pressed down harder, testing the limits. "What's the matter, officer? You scared to get your hands dirty?" Jack's mind flashed back to another time, another place, a dusty village, Halfway around the world, the sound of gunfire echoing through the night. He remembered the feel of Thor's fur under his hand. The only thing that kept him grounded as chaos raged around them. He remembered the promise he'd made to his partner. LL. Always have your back. Thor had been more than a canine on those missions. He'd been a lifeline, a friend, a reason to keep going when everything else seemed lost. Together, they'd tracked insurgents through the mountains, found hostages in the dark, and survived ambushes that should have killed them both. Thor had saved Jack's life more times than he could count. After the war, they'd come home together, both carrying scars that no one else could see. Jack had joined the police force, hoping to find a new purpose. Thor had followed his loyalty unbreakable. They'd become legends in the department. Their bond, the stuff of whispered stories and late-night toasts. But fame meant nothing to the man in the leather jacket. He leaned in, his voice a low threat. Maybe your dog needs to learn who's boss. Jack's eyes flashed, but his voice was still calm. You're making a mistake. The man's friends laughed, but a few of them shifted uncomfortably, sensing the change in the air. One of them, a lanky kid with nervous eyes, tugged at the man's sleeve. Come on, man. Let's go. This isn't funny anymore. But the man ignored him, his pride on the line. He pressed down one last time, daring Jack to react. Jack took a slow breath, his mind racing through options. He could end this in a dozen ways, most of them violent, all of them effective. But Thor was watching, and so was the crowd. Jack needed to show strength, but also restraint. He stepped forward, his voice dropping to a whisper only the man could hear. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Take your foot off my dog, or I promise you'll regret it. For a moment, the man hesitated. Something in Jack's eyes, something cold and unyielding, made him falter. But pride won out. He sneered. Make me. Jack's hand moved in a blur, faster than anyone could follow. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it just enough to force him off balance. At the same time, he stepped between Thor and the man, shielding his partner with his own body. The man yelped, stumbling back. His friend surged forward, but Jack didn't flinch. He stood till his presence commanding, his eyes never leaving the man's. Walk away, Jack said, his voice like steel. Now, the man glared, rubbing his wrist. But something in Jack's stance, something honed by years of training and battle, made him think twice. He spat on the ground, then turned and stalked away, his friends trailing behind. The crowd let out a collective breath, some clapping, others murmuring in awe. A few people approached Jack, thanking him for standing up to the bullies, but Jack barely heard them. He knelt beside Thor, checking his paw for injuries. You okay, buddy? He whispered. Thor licked Jack's hand, his eyes full of trust. A little boy in the crowd tugged at his mother's sleeve. Mom, is that dog a hero? His mother smiled, her eyes shining. Yes, sweetheart. He is. But as the crowd began to disperse, Jack noticed something else, a group of men watching from across the square, their faces hard and unfriendly. He recognized them from old Case Files gang members, troublemakers, the kind who didn't like cops or anyone who stood up to them. Jack's instincts screamed a warning. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. He stood, his hand resting on Thor's head, and scanned the square. The night was far from done, and the real danger was just beginning to show itself. The square slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but Jack's senses were on high alert. He could feel the eyes of the gang members across the street, their stares heavy with resentment and challenge. Thor, too, was tense, his ears pricked, his body pressed close to Jack's leg, every muscle ready to spring into action. Jack led Thor away from the crowd, heading toward the quieter side streets. He needed to clear his head, to put some distance between himself and the men who had just marked him as a target. But as he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was following him. He ducked into a narrow alley, the city's noise fading behind him. Thor sniffed the air, his tail low, his eyes scanning the shadows. Jack paused, listening. Footsteps echoed behind them, too many to be a coincidence. Jack turned, his posture relaxed but his mind racing. 4 men stepped into the alley, blocking the exit. The leader was the same man who had put his foot on Thor, his face twisted with anger and humiliation. "You think you can embarrass me in front of everyone?" The man spat. "You think you're better than us?" Jack didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the group, his hand resting lightly on Thor's harness. The dog was silent, but his body was coiled, ready to defend his partner at a moment's notice. The men spread out, trying to surround Jack and Thor. One of them pulled a knife, the blade glinting in the dim light. Another cracked his knuckles, grinning. Jack's mind flashed back to his special forces, days ambushes, in the dark, outnumbered and outgunned, relying on training and instinct to survive. He felt the old calm settle over him, the world narrowing to the threat in front of him and the partner at his side. "Last chance," Jack said quietly. "Walk away." The leader laughed, but there was a tremor in his voice. "Or what? You gonna sick your dog on us?" Jack's eyes hardened. "If you touch him again, you'll find out." The man lunged, the knife flashing. In a blur, Jack sidestepped, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it behind his back. The knife clattered to the ground. Thor barked, a deep, booming sound that echoed off the alley walls. The other men hesitated, but Jack didn't give them a chance to regroup. He swept the leader's legs out from under him, pinning him to the ground with a knee in his back. Thor stood guard, his teeth bared, his eyes locked on the remaining men. One of them tried to rush Jack, but Thor intercepted him, knocking him to the ground with a controlled, powerful leap. The man scrambled back, fear in his eyes. Jack looked up, his voice cold. "You want to keep going? Or are we done here?" The men exchanged glances, their bravado crumbling. One by one, they turned and ran, leaving their leader pinned beneath Jack's knee. Jack leaned in, his voice a low growl. "You'll ever touch my partner again, you'll wish you hadn't." He let the man up, watching as he stumbled away, clutching his wrist. Thor relaxed, his tail wagging as he looked up at Jack, waiting for praise. "Good boy," Jack whispered, scratching Thor behind the ears. As they left the alley, Jack noticed a small group of bystanders at the end of the street. Among them was the lanky kid from earlier, his eyes wide with awe. "Are you okay, officer?" the kid called. Jack nodded. "We're fine, just a little misunderstanding." The kid grinned. "You're like a superhero, and your dog is awesome." Jack smiled, but inside, he felt the weight of what had just happened. He knew the gang wouldn't give up so easily. They'd seen his skills, glimpsed the man he used to be, and now they'd want revenge. But Jack wasn't afraid. He'd faced worse, survived more, and with Thor at his side, he knew he could handle whatever came next. As he walked back toward the square, Jack's phone buzzed. It was a message from his captain. "Heard about the incident?" Jack typed a quick reply. "We're good. Situation under control." Thor nudged his hand, sensing his unease. Jack smiled, grateful for the silent support. "Let's go, partner," he said. "We've got work to do." And as they disappeared into the city's shadows, the legend of the elite special forces officer and his loyal dog grew just a little bit larger. The city's night air was thick with tension as Jack and Thor made their way back toward the heart of downtown. The adrenaline from the alley confrontation still pulsed in Jack's veins, but he kept his composure, scanning every shadow, every face. He knew the gang wouldn't let the humiliation go unanswered. He also knew that Thor, Eberbihiland, would sense danger before it arrived. As they reached the edge of the square, Jack noticed a commotion near a convenience store. A crowd had gathered, voices raised in panic. Jack's instincts kicked in. He and Thor moved quickly, pushing through the crowd to the source of the chaos. Inside the store, the same gang members from the alley were holding the clerk at knife point. The leader, his wrist still sore from Jack's earlier hold, barked orders at the terrified cashier. "Open the register! Now!" Jack signaled Thor to stay low, then stepped into the doorway, his voice calm but commanding. "Let him go. This doesn't have to get worse." The gang members spun around, surprise and fear flickering across their faces. The leader sneered, trying to regain control. "You again? You just don't know when to quit, do you?" Jack's eyes narrowed. "You're making another mistake. Walk away while you still can. The leader laughed, but it was hollow. Or what? You're gonna send your mutt after us? Jack didn't answer. Instead, he gave a subtle hand signal. Thor moved like lightning, darting behind the counter and positioning himself between the gang and the clerk. The dog's presence was enough to make one of the younger gang members drop his weapon and back away. The leader lunged at Jack, knife raised. But Jack's training took over. He sidestepped, grabbed the man's arm, and twisted, sending the knife skittering across the floor. Thor barked, a deep, booming sound that froze everyone in place. The remaining gang members hesitated, fear finally overtaking bravado. Jack's voice was low, but it carried the weight of every battle he'd ever fought. It's over. You're done. One by one, the gang members dropped their weapons and raised their hands. The store clerk, shaking but unharmed, called 911. Within minutes, police cars arrived, sirens blaring. Officers poured into the store, cuffing the gang members and leading them out into the night. The crowd outside erupted in applause, some people cheering, others wiping away tears. The story spread quickly how a police dog and his mysterious handler had stopped a robbery, how the officer had moved with the precision and calm of a soldier, how the dog had protected not just his partner but everyone in the store. The police chief arrived, shaking Jack's hand. You and Thor saved lives tonight. I don't know how you do it, but I'm glad you're on our side. Jack nodded, his eyes softening as he looked at Thor. He's the real hero. A reporter pushed through the crowd, microphone in hand. Officer Mason, is it true you served in special forces before joining the police? Jack hesitated, unused to the spotlight. But the truth was out now: his skills, his calm under pressure, his bond with Thor. He nodded. We served together. He saved my life more times than I can count. The reporter smiled. And tonight, you saved ours. As the crowd dispersed, Jack knelt beside Thor, scratching his ears. You did good, partner. Real good. Thor wagged his tail, his eyes shining with pride. The city would talk about that night for years to come. The night a group of thugs learned the hard way that you never mess with a police dog, especially one bound to an elite special forces officer. But for Jack and Thor, it was just another mission, another promise kept. As they walked home under the city lights, Jack felt a sense of peace. He knew there would always be darkness in the world, always be people who tried to hurt the innocent. But as long as he had Thor by his side, it was ready for whatever came next. And somewhere in the city, a little boy told his mother, I want to be brave like that officer and his dog when I grow up. The days that followed were filled with gratitude, reflection, and a new sense of respect throughout the city. News of the convenience store rescue spread quickly, making headlines in local papers and on television. The story of the police dog who stood his ground and the mysterious officer who moved with the calm precision of a soldier captured the imagination of everyone who heard it. Jack and Thor became the talk of the department. Officers who had always respected Jack now looked at him with a new sense of awe. Younger recruits asked for advice, eager to learn from the man who had faced down a gang without firing a shot. The chief called Jack into his office, shaking his hand and presenting him with a commendation for bravery and restraint. But Jack, ever humble, deflected the praise. Thor did most of the work, sir. He's the real hero. The chief smiled. You're both heroes, and you've reminded this city what true courage looks like. Thor, too, was honored. The department held a small ceremony, pinning a special medal to his collar. Children from the local elementary schools sent drawings and thank you cards, some depicting Thor as a superhero, cape and all. The city's animal shelter started a campaign in Thor's name, encouraging families to adopt and train rescue dogs. Jack's past as a special forces operator was no longer a secret, but he found that people respected him even more for it. Parents stopped him on the street, thanking him for protecting their children. Veterans reached out, sharing their own stories of service and struggle. Jack realized that by opening up about his past, he could help others heal, too. The gang members who had started the trouble were charged with assault, attempted robbery, and resisting arrest. Their leader, once so arrogant, now sat quietly in a courtroom, unable to meet Jack's eyes. The judge commended Jack and Thor for their restraint and professionalism, noting that their actions had likely prevented a tragedy. But for Jack, the real reward was the bond he shared with Thor. Every morning, as they set out on patrol, Jack felt a sense of purpose and peace. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Thor would face them together. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Jack sat on his porch, Thor at his feet. He watched the lights flicker on in the windows around him, listened to the distant sounds of laughter and music, and felt a deep sense of contentment. A neighbor stopped by, her young son in tow. The boy looked up at Jack, his eyes wide with admiration. "Are you really a hero, mister?" Jack smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Anyone can be a hero, kid. You just have to stand up for what's right and never leave your friends behind." The boy grinned, reaching out to pet Thor. "I want a dog like him when I grow up." Jack looked down at his partner, pride swelling in his chest. He's one of a kind, but there are a lot of good dogs out there, just waiting for someone to believe in them. As the stars appeared in the sky, Jack reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from the battlefields overseas to the streets of his city, from the darkness of war to the light of service and friendship. He knew there would always be challenges, always be people who tried to hurt the innocent, but as long as there were men and women willing to stand up, as long as there were loyal friends like Thor, there was hope. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, true strength isn't about power or violence, it's about courage, loyalty, and the willingness to protect those who can't protect themselves. Because sometimes, the bravest heroes walk on four legs, and sometimes, the quietest warriors carry the greatest strength.